I know a lot of you probably knew Bill Nelson a lot better than I did, but this is my story about the short political life of Bill Nelson. Bill Nelson was already the voice of the Dallas's gay community by the time I met him in December of 1986. I was a City Hall reporter for the Dallas Morning News, and it was my assignment that day to find out why Bill had decided to make a second run for city council seat after not making it through the primary race just the previous year. Bill said he felt sure this time he would have a better outcome because he was a better candidate. He has stepped outside the gay community and had prepared himself on Dallas's issues, large and small. He knew more, and he believed that voters would see beyond what he had done to promote civil rights and other issues he had tackled as a gay leader. Quote, 2 years ago, he said, "I thought I had something to offer the city. Since then, I've broadened my area of expertise." And then he described how he'd become the president of his neighborhood association in East Dallas, sat on the board of the Dallas Homeowners League. But he hadn't stepped down yet as president of the Dallas Gay Alliance, hoping, I guess, that people would accept his desire to continue to lead that community as well. But he was embracing some tough issues for Dallas. He wanted the city to take more responsibility for human services such as health care for the poor and shelter for the homeless. This was a time when destitute families were living in their cars in dark corners of downtown Dallas because the city had no services for them. I know because I wrote about that too. He also wanted to change the configuration of the 11-member city council in hopes of reducing the influence of the 3 at-large seats, which tended to be filled by people who wanted to run Dallas like a business rather than as a place where people actually lived. In fact, Bill wanted one of those at-large seats in order to break the mold. Quote, "At-large seats have tended to favor business and development interests," he said. "I'm not anti-business, but I'm against insensitive business development that encroaches on homeowners' property rights." Bill ended up challenging a developer who held the seat for 2 years and who pretty much ignored him throughout the race. As much as Bill tried to broaden his base and talk about citywide issues, the media, not me, was focused mainly on the fact he was such a prominent gay leader and that his election would result in the first openly gay city council member. This was 1987, if you recall, and so few gay politicians were out of the closet then. And he was running as the AIDS epidemic was unfolding in frightening detail. It had to have some negative effect on the outcome of his race. And I know William Wayburn, his campaign manager, has his own view of what happened during that election, and he blames my colleagues for not recognizing Bill's promise as a politician, for not seeing him as anything more than a gay leader. But I have to say, it was always going to be tough to break the business stranglehold on City Hall, especially on those citywide seats. However, Annette Strauss did win the mayor's race that night in 1987, which was a surprise outcome considering her opponent was a well-known businessman. But she was also had a well-regarded last name. She served on the city council, and she strung together a ragtag campaign of homeowner groups, minority leaders in the gay community that recognized her humanity and her promise to take Dallas on a different track. Although Bill spent a lot of money, campaigned door to door, he got only 23% of the vote. Exhausted and discouraged by the outcome, he said he felt the political system in Dallas was not going to work for gay politicians. I didn't know then, when I met Bill in '86, that 3 years later I'd be sitting in his living room, interviewing him again about what went wrong in that race. So much had happened in those intervening years. I not only became the paper's full-time AIDS reporter, which meant that's all I was writing about, but one of the stories I did was the obituary for Terry Thibodeau, Bill's life partner, who died in early '88. Luckily, I got to know Terry a little through a series of stories that I did, starting with an AIDS demonstration at City Hall. I also got a few glimpses into Bill's personal life, although as a reporter, I really was trying to maintain an objective distance from the people I was writing about. When I heard in 1989 that Bill was terribly sick too, I had to wait for him to recover before we sat down and talked about what he was trying to accomplish when he put himself out there in those city council races. Why did you do it? when it was such a long shot. I asked him during that home visit in February 1989. Quote, "It wasn't personal," he said. "It was not about ambition. It was just the right time for an openly gay candidate to challenge the assumption of Dallas voters. Quote, "I knew then I was running as a gay man who just happened to be Bill Nelson," he said. What I didn't know was that Bill also faced so much criticism within various factions of the gay community. He was chastised for running too soon, for not stepping down as DGA president when he should have, which would have proven to some people that he was committed to actually winning. Bill said for him, the resignation would have signaled that he was trying to hide his involvement in the gay community. Quote, "One reason I decided to run," he said, "was to inject ourselves as a community into places we'd never gone before. Places like the Eagle Forum, one of those most conservative women's groups in America at the time, and quite an active group in Dallas." Twice, Bill spoke to the Eagle Forum, and he particularly enjoyed confusing them with their own politics. Really, it was funny. Quote, "I talked about American values and patriotism and what's important to this country," he told me. "I used their words, I used their vocabulary, and talked about the things I knew were important to them. That just did not compute. They were shaking their heads yes, and then realized, oh my God." Finally, he hit on his ultimate reason. It was an opportunity to make the point that gay people should be involved in all aspects of life. Bill thought he opened some eyes in the first campaign because he was so conversant on the issues in Oak Lawn, which was the heart of that council district. But the second time around, despite all his homework, he could not expand his political base far enough. Quote, "I was genuinely concerned about some of the problems that I had discovered," he said. "You have to kind of discover things in Dallas. Nobody holds them out to you and says, look how screwed up we are. You have to go out, start talking to people, real people, and find problems that are pretty severe." Even though Bill didn't win either race, he felt he made inroads in other communities and found lots of overlapping issues between the black and gay communities, for example, beyond civil rights. Quote, "Unfortunately, we were in an alliance of the unpowerful," he said with a laugh. It was a fun talk that afternoon in 1989, punctuated with stories about how Bill had started baking and was taking cooking lessons from his mom, Jean Nelson, who was living with him then because he was so sick. Bill hadn't lost interest in local politics or lost his appetite for learning new things. He was still quite hopeful about the time he had left, even though he could no longer digest regular food and was being fed through a tube. "I can have some good days," he said. "I've picked out things that I want to see, including a wisteria vine that would bloom that spring outside his bedroom window. I thought I was going to miss it," he said. Bill died from AIDS a year later, leaving a legacy of outspoken leadership in the gay community in those two unsuccessful campaigns for a city council seat. But he also paved the way for other openly gay politicians who would one day become Dallas County Sheriff, Dallas County District Clerk, Dallas School Board members, a Dallas County Judge, and of course, the members of Dallas City Council.